What if you suddenly lost everything, your job, your home, your dreams, and there was no one left to support you? What if, in the blink of an eye, your carefully constructed world fell apart, leaving you standing on the edge of the unknown? Would you crumble under the weight of it all, or would you rise up and find the courage to rebuild? This was the question that ran through Emily Carter's mind as she stared at the cold, gray ceiling of her tiny apartment, the phone call from her boss still echoing in her ears. Her hands shook as she dropped the receiver back onto the desk. The words she had just heard felt surreal, like they didn't belong in her reality. She had been laid off from her job at a cutting-edge tech company, the job she had worked so hard to secure, the one that was supposed to be her ticket to success. Her life had been on a fast track ever since she graduated from MIT with a degree in computer science. Every move she made had been calculated, every decision driven by the desire to succeed in Silicon Valley, the epicenter of innovation and ambition. She had lived and breathed her work, long hours, sleepless nights, and the unrelenting pursuit of her career goals. But now, it all seemed meaningless. As the days blurred into each other, Emily struggled to accept the reality of her situation. Without a steady income, she couldn't pay her bills. Her dreams of climbing the corporate ladder in the tech world were slipping further away with every passing hour. The weight of uncertainty crushed her chest, and the silence of her apartment felt deafening. She had never been one to give up, but in this moment, she couldn't help but feel lost. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The voice on her TV said, interrupting her spiral of despair. Emily glanced at the screen, her eyes catching a documentary about Elon Musk. His face flashed across the screen, his trademark confident smile cutting through the gloom in the room. She didn't know why, but something about his presence struck a chord in her. The man who had revolutionized multiple industries, the man who had failed and risen again, was somehow comforting. How had he done it? How had he built companies from the ground up, facing enormous odds and ridicule, only to come out on top? The answer wasn't simple, but as she watched him speak about his failures, his struggles, and the relentless drive that kept him going, Emily realized something. Maybe she didn't have to stay stuck in this moment. Maybe the world wasn't finished with her just yet. The idea struck her like a bolt of lightning. She wasn't going to let herself spiral any further. She had spent so many years chasing the approval of others, trying to prove herself worthy in the eyes of her peers. But what if the hardest thing she had to do was just take a leap into the unknown? What if, like Musk, she needed to start something of her own? Emily had always admired Musk's determination to push through the darkest moments. When everyone told him to give up, when his companies were on the brink of failure, he found a way to keep going. She could do that too. She could find her own path, her own vision, and see it through, no matter what it took. She grabbed a notebook from the desk and began jotting down ideas. What did she want to create? What could she build that had meaning, that could change the world in some way, even if it was a small step? The questions swirled in her mind, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready to try. It was early the next morning when Emily made her decision. She would quit her job in search of something bigger, something that challenged her in ways she hadn't imagined. The startup world was brutal, competitive, and unpredictable, but so was life. And she wasn't about to let fear dictate her future. Her phone buzzed with a message from her best friend, Katie, asking if she was okay. The two of them had been friends since college, and while Katie was working as a product manager at a rival tech company, Emily had always been the one who pushed the boundaries. Katie knew how much Emily had invested in her job, how hard she had worked to earn a position in the heart of the tech industry. "I'm fine," Emily typed back. "I'm just thinking." She thought about telling Katie the truth, but she didn't feel ready. She wasn't even sure if she believed in her decision yet. But deep down, she knew that something had shifted within her. The comfort of the known was no longer enough. If she was going to take the next step, she had to do it now, before she lost her courage. By the end of the day, Emily had written a letter of resignation. It felt strange, almost freeing, as she hit send to notify her manager. There was no going back. She didn't know where this new path would lead, but it felt right. A part of her wondered if she was being reckless, if she was making a huge mistake. But another part of her, the part that had always craved more, felt a sense of excitement. She was about to embark on something she had only dreamed of, a journey of her own making. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning, meetings, and sleepless nights. Emily knew she had to act fast before her savings ran out. She began researching potential investors, refining her business idea, and preparing a pitch. Every decision was calculated, every moment filled with a sense of urgency. She had no fallback plan. This was her chance, and she was going to give it everything she had. But as she sat in front of her computer, staring at the blank screen, doubt crept in. What if no one believed in her idea? What if she failed? What if, despite all her hard work, the world just wasn't ready for her vision? The fear was paralyzing, but Emily forced herself to push it aside. She thought about Elon Musk again. He had failed so many times, but he kept going. Maybe that was the key. No matter how many times she fell, she had to keep getting back up. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. It was time to take the first step. Emily's heart raced as she sent out her first pitch to a potential investor. She wasn't sure if it would lead to anything, but she couldn't let fear hold her back anymore. This was her moment, this was the turning point. The hardest thing she had ever done was yet to come, but Emily felt something new stirring inside her. For the first time in a long time, she was in control of her destiny. No more waiting. No more wondering. She was going to build something that mattered. As she hit send on the email, she couldn't help but smile. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And that was all she needed. Emily Carter had always known exactly what she wanted from life. Ever since she was a kid growing up in a quiet suburb outside of Chicago, she'd dreamed in code. While other little girls played dress-up or planned weddings with plastic dolls, Emily was glued to an old desktop PC her mom found at a garage sale. She learned HTML before she hit puberty. By high school, she'd built her first app. Nothing flashy, just a homework organizer, but it won her second place at a state tech fair. That little win changed everything. It gave her a taste of what it felt like to make something out of nothing. Her parents didn't really get it. Especially her dad. Computers are fine as a hobby, he'd said once, arms crossed, voice flat. But they're not going to pay the bills. Emily still remembered how those words made her shrink. He was a mechanic, old school, hands-on, stubborn. He believed in tangible things. Wrenches. Engines. Sweat. He didn't understand coding, and worse, he didn't try to. Every success Emily had was met with silence or a condescending nod. But her mom had been different. Quietly supportive, always in the background, nudging Emily forward in her own gentle way. When Emily got into MIT, it was her mom who sold her wedding ring to help cover the first semester's expenses. She never said a word about it, Emily only found out years later. That sacrifice lit a fire in her. College wasn't just for her anymore. It was for every person who believed in her, even if it was just one. So she worked. Hard. All-nighters, caffeine-fueled coding marathons, internships no one else wanted, hackathons every weekend. She landed a coveted spot at VentureBridge Tech, a flashy AI startup in Palo Alto, right after graduation. For a while, it felt like everything was falling into place. The money was good, the work was exciting, and the world was watching. Emily was exactly where she had dreamed of being. And yet, something was off. The startup culture wasn't quite what she'd imagined. It wasn't the creative playground she'd expected. It was a pressure cooker. Everything was about metrics, growth, burn rates. People worked themselves to the bone for a chance at IPO glory. And even then, it was mostly men who got to sit at the big table. As one of the few women engineers, Emily constantly had to prove herself. She was talked over in meetings. Her ideas were credited to others. She watched less competent co-workers rise simply because they played the politics game better. Still, she kept pushing. Because quitting would feel like confirming what her dad always believed, that her dream wasn't real, that it wouldn't last. But when VentureBridge lost a major funding round, the company cut 40% of its staff. Emily, despite her long hours and loyalty, was on the chopping block. Just like that, her dream, years in the making, was shattered. In the days following the layoff, Emily didn't tell anyone. Not even Katie. She felt ashamed, like her failure was personal. She didn't leave the apartment much. Her days were filled with Netflix, cold coffee, and aimless scrolling through job listings she had no desire to apply for. What haunted her most wasn't the loss of the job, it was the feeling that she had lost herself in the process. What had all the sacrifice been for? She couldn't stop replaying the moment her boss let her go, how robotic he sounded, how he didn't even look her in the eye. After 5 years, she didn't even rate a proper goodbye. The memory made her blood boil. It also made her realize something: she had given too much power to people who didn't value her. And deep down, under the frustration and sadness, a different emotion was starting to bubble up: clarity. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something better. Something hers. One night, around 2 a.m., Emily found herself back on YouTube, half watching interviews while stress-eating peanut butter out of the jar. That's when she stumbled across a conversation between Elon Musk and Joe Rogan. Musk talked about risk, about being willing to look stupid, about walking into chaos with open arms if it meant building something worthwhile. And then he said it. If something is important enough, even if the odds are against you, you should still do it. Emily paused the video. Rewound. Played it again. She grabbed her journal, one she hadn't touched in over a year, and scribbled that quote on the first page. Underneath it, in shaky handwriting, she added, "What's important enough to me?" She didn't have the full answer yet. But she knew one thing. She didn't want to go back to building someone else's dream. If she was going to work 80-hour weeks, it was going to be for something she believed in. Something she owned. She wasn't naive. She knew startups failed every day. But she also knew that every successful founder had a moment like this, when everything crumbled, and they had to decide whether to stay down or get up swinging. This was her moment. The next morning, she called Katie. "I think I want to start something," she said. There was silence on the other end. "You mean, like a company?" "Yeah." Katie laughed nervously. "You just got laid off. Don't you think maybe you should take a breath before?" "I've already taken the breath," Emily said. "I've been breathing for 2 weeks. And it's time I do something that actually scares me." Katie didn't argue. She knew Emily well enough to recognize the tone in her voice. The last time she sounded like this, she ended up building a scheduling algorithm in college that professors still use to assign student project groups. "Okay," Katie said. "Then let's figure it out. What do you want to build?" Emily looked out her window, the early morning sun bleeding through the fog. For the first time in weeks, the weight on her chest felt just a little bit lighter. "I don't know yet," she said. "But I'm going to find out. Every great idea starts as a whisper. You just have to get quiet enough to hear it." Emily had no office, no investors, no product, just a slightly beat-up laptop and a fire in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Her world had gone from boardrooms and deadlines to coffee-stained pajamas and Google Docs with working titles like startup_thoughts_final_finalv2. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But for the first time in her adult life, Emily Carter wasn't trying to please a boss, a company, or even her resume. She was chasing something real. The problem was, she didn't know what something was yet. She set up camp at the corner table of a coffee shop 3 blocks from her apartment, living off oat milk lattes and power outlets. Her days were filled with scribbled ideas, sketching out mind maps, rereading Musk quotes, and researching every successful female founder she could find, from Whitney Wolfe Herd to Wojcicki. She devoured their interviews, trying to reverse engineer their thought processes. But the more she read, the more she felt like she was just waiting. For what, exactly, she wasn't sure. And then came the walk. It was late afternoon, the sky just beginning to shift to orange. Her legs needed movement after hours glued to a screen. She didn't even plan her route, she just walked. Past apartment buildings, to Carius, a closed-down bookstore, until she reached the edge of a rundown public school. Something about it stopped her. There were kids outside, probably waiting for their parents. Some sat cross-legged on the sidewalk, others hovered around a woman wearing a faded school hoodie, clearly trying to keep order while checking her phone. But what caught Emily's eye wasn't the kids. It was the sign taped to the school's locked front door. After-school robotics program suspended due to budget cuts. She blinked. Her mind froze, then flooded. Flashbacks of her own school days came rushing in. The one teacher who saw her potential. The old, donated computer lab. The countless times she was told coding wasn't for girls. And now, here it was again. The same cycle. The same lost potential. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts spun. What if they never get access again? What if the next great innovator is sitting in that schoolyard, waiting for someone to believe in them? That's when the idea hit. Not fully formed, not polished, but it was there. A whisper, like she'd hoped for. Build a platform that makes tech education more accessible. Not just for kids in affluent neighborhoods or elite prep schools, but for everyone. A virtual tech mentorship and learning hub, using gamification and real-world projects to teach programming, design, and AI fundamentals to underserved youth. The idea made her pulse race. She wasn't the first to want to teach coding. But what if she made it cool, accessible, and interactive, a hybrid of Duolingo, Twitch, and masterclasses? Something that didn't just teach you how to code but helped you believe you belonged in tech. She could call it something like Code Kindle, a spark for the next generation. The next morning, she called Katie. I've got it. Got what? The idea. Katie laughed through a yawn. That was fast. I walked past a school last night. They canceled their robotics program. And I realized, no one's coming to fix that unless someone makes it happen. What if we could build a virtual platform that taught tech skills to kids who can't get it anywhere else? Not boring lectures. Real engagement. Community. Mentorship. Empowerment. Katie didn't laugh this time. Okay, that's actually brilliant. It's not a non-profit, Emily added quickly. It's sustainable. Tiered access. Premium memberships for schools with budgets. Free access for underfunded ones. We partner with tech companies for sponsorships. They need pipeline diversity anyway. Why not invest early? Katie paused. You've really thought this through. Just enough to be terrified. Emily expected the doubt to creep in again. The fear of being too idealistic or not qualified. But surprisingly, it didn't. Not this time. The clarity was electric. Katie exhaled. Okay. So what's next? Emily pulled up a blank slide deck and typed the words. Code Kindle, igniting the future of tech, one student at a time. Then she opened another tab and Googled. How to write a startup pitch that doesn't suck. The next 3 weeks were chaos. Glorious, caffeine-fueled, spreadsheet-riddled chaos. Emily built a rough prototype using open-source tools. She reached out to former coworkers, developers, UX designers, education consultants, anyone who might be interested. A few ignored her. But some didn't. One of them, Zoe Nguyen, was a former intern who had gone into EdTech. Zoe loved the idea and agreed to help build the MVP. They mocked up user flows, created gamified lesson plans, and recorded a sample walkthrough video. Emily even cold emailed a YouTube coding influencer and, shockingly, got a reply. He agreed to mention their concept in a live stream, just for the story. Momentum started building. Slowly, unevenly. But it was real. Of course, not everyone was supportive. Her father still didn't understand. "So, you're building a website for kids now," he'd said during a strained phone call. "Sounds like a hobby, not a job." Emily didn't argue. She just smiled and said, "You'll see." Because this time, she meant it. An idea means nothing until you put it into motion. The pitch deck looked fine. Not great. Not awful. Just fine. Emily stared at it for the 100th time, dragging slides around, tweaking colors, rewriting bullet points she already knew by heart. Her eyes burned from staring at her screen for 16 straight hours. But this deck, this simple, 20-slide presentation, was her golden ticket. Or at least, she hoped it would be. Tomorrow morning, she was pitching CodeKindle for the very first time to a small group of angel investors, friends of Katie's boss, who occasionally funded early-stage ideas. It wasn't Shark Tank. There were no million-dollar checks waiting in some back pocket. But it was something. And that meant everything. She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. Her one-bedroom apartment felt unusually silent, like even the walls were holding their breath. For a long moment, she sat in the dark, listening to the soft hum of her fridge and the occasional passing car. Was she really about to do this? There was no corporate badge to hide behind. No fancy job title. No product market fit. Just her, an untested idea, and the unwavering belief that she could do something that mattered. She whispered the words out loud, like a dare. "I'm a founder now." And then, no turning back. The next morning, Emily arrived at the co-working space early, too early. She had never pitched anything before, not really. Sure, she'd given presentations in college. She'd led team meetings at VentureBridge. But this? This was different. This was asking people to believe in her. The meeting room was small, with glass walls and one long oak table. A Keurig machine hissed in the corner. She set up her laptop, connected the HDMI cable, checked her slides 3 times. She even practiced her opening line in her head, "Hi, I'm Emily Carter, founder of CodeKindle." Her hands were ice. At 10:02 a.m., they arrived, 3 investors. 2 men, 1 woman. All casually dressed, probably in their late 30s or early 40s. They introduced themselves politely, shook hands, and settled in. One of them, Ethan Tran, the one with the notepad and the calm demeanor, seemed to be leading the meeting. "All right, Emily," Ethan said with a small smile. "Let's hear what you've got." She clicked the spacebar. The first few minutes went smoothly. Her voice trembled slightly, but her slides did their job. She talked about the equity gap in tech education, the lack of access to resources, and the potential of reaching underserved students through engaging, interactive tools. She cited stats. She showed mock-ups. She outlined the business model. But then came the questions. How do you plan to scale if you're relying on free-tier access? What's your go-to-market strategy? How are you different from Codecademy or Khan Academy? What's your personal background in EdTech? Some she answered well. Others, she stumbled through. At one point, she completely blanked on the term churn rate. She tried to smile through it. Fake confidence, right? Isn't that what every TED Talk said to do? Ethan listened carefully the whole time, never interrupting. When it was over, he leaned back and folded his arms. "I like your passion," he said. "That's clear." Emily felt her heart rise. But passion isn't enough. Not in this space. EdTech is a hard sell, and you're entering a very noisy market. Crash. Her chest tightened. She nodded slowly, trying to stay composed. "But," Ethan continued, "there's something here. Your perspective's unique. Your experience is relevant. And your vision feels authentic. You're clearly solving a real problem." Emily looked up, surprised. "I'm not ready to invest yet," he added, "but I'd like to see a working beta. Maybe a few test users. Come back when you've got data." "Okay," she said, quickly. "I will." "Good. I'm rooting for you." Outside, the sunlight was sharp, but Emily felt strangely calm. She hadn't landed a check. She hadn't blown them away. But she hadn't failed, either. She'd made it through. And now? Now she had direction. She called Katie. "Well?" Katie asked. "How'd it go?" "Not a yes," Emily replied. "But not a no either. Which in founder speak is a win. A small one. But a win." Katie whooped. "That's what I'm talking about. You just pitched your first investor. Emily Carter, CEO. I love it." Emily laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. That night, Emily cracked open her laptop again, but this time with a new goal: building the beta. She and Zoe set up a project management board, divided the MVP into modules, and started prototyping lesson plans. Zoe knew a guy named Mark who could help with back-end infrastructure. Emily reached out to a few nonprofits who worked with underfunded schools to ask about pilot programs. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was building. Every late night, every technical glitch, every frustrating line of buggy code, none of it felt like a burden. It felt like momentum. And as she stared at the blinking cursor on the screen, she thought again of Musk's quote. "If something is important enough, even if the odds are against you, you should still do it." She didn't need every investor to say yes. She just needed one. She didn't need to change the world overnight. She just needed to start. Emily Carter had always considered herself practical, ambitious, sure, but never reckless. She budgeted. She saved. She always paid her rent early. But now, just 6 weeks into her entrepreneurial journey, that careful world was starting to crumble. She stared at her online banking app in silence. $1,486.23. That was all she had left after rent, groceries, and 2 months of scrappy startup spending. Her savings were nearly drained, her credit card was already taking hits, and Code Kindle was still weeks away from a functioning beta. She closed her laptop, heart pounding. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "You're not broke. Yet. You're just pre-broke." The joke didn't land, even in her own mind. The days blurred together. Emily worked from sunup to well past midnight, toggling between code, pitch decks, user interface mockups, and increasingly desperate emails to potential partners. She was still living on caffeine and momentum, but the anxiety was creeping in like water through a cracked window. Zoe was doing everything she could to help, taking on extra freelance gigs just to keep their development moving. Mark, the back-end engineer, agreed to work for deferred equity, at least for now. But Emily couldn't shake the pressure building on her chest. She was burning fast. And soon, she'd be out of runway. Katie invited her out for drinks one night, a rare escape, but Emily declined. Not because she didn't want to go. But because she couldn't afford a $14 cocktail anymore. That realization hit her harder than she expected. "I'm all in," she told herself. "This is what all in looks like." 3 days later, her landlord knocked on her door with a clipboard. "Hey, Emily," he said with an awkward smile. "Just checking in. Rent's coming up. You're still good for next month, right?" She swallowed. "Yep. Totally. No worries." He nodded, satisfied, and left. As soon as the door shut, she slid to the floor. She wasn't going to make rent. Not unless she did something drastic. Later that night, Emily sat at her kitchen table surrounded by spreadsheets, bills, and the warped remains of a Trader Joe's frozen pizza. She stared at the single envelope she hadn't opened yet, her lease renewal. Her building had raised rent. Again. It was time to face it, she couldn't afford to stay. The words tasted sour. Her apartment was small, barely 600 square feet, but it was hers. It had witnessed every phase of her life, from all-nighters at Venture Bridge to ugly crying on the floor after her layoff. It was safety. Stability. Sanity. Leaving felt like giving up a piece of herself. But the numbers didn't lie. If she stayed, Code Kindle would die. She wouldn't even make it to beta. She opened her phone and dialed the one person she didn't want to call. "Hi, Mom." Emily hadn't been home in almost a year. Not since Christmas. Her mom lived just outside Chicago in the same modest house Emily had grown up in. Her dad was still there too. Gruff, mostly silent, more judgmental than helpful. But she needed time. Just a few months. A reset. So, her mom said gently after hearing the whole story. "You want to come home? Just temporarily. I'll sleep in my old room, I won't get in the way. I need to stretch every dollar right now." Her mom didn't hesitate. "Of course, sweetie. You come home. I'll get the room ready." Emily exhaled, relief and dread swirling together. "Thanks, Mom." But then came the question she'd been bracing for. "What about your father?" "I'll deal with it," Emily said. "This is bigger than him." Packing up her life was one of the hardest things she'd ever done. Each box felt like a quiet admission of failure. Not permanent failure. But a step back. She tried to reframe it as strategy, like Musk selling off his cars and couch surfing during the early Tesla years. Still, the sting was real. Katie came over to help. "You're doing the right thing," she said, taping up Emily's book box. "Doesn't feel like it," Emily muttered. Katie looked at her. "You're sacrificing comfort to chase something bigger than yourself. That's exactly what Musk did. You think he had it easy? He slept on factory floors. You're just sleeping in your childhood bed. Big difference." Emily gave a weak smile. "I hate that you're good at pep talks." Katie winked. "You'll thank me when you're on the Forbes 30 under 30 list." The day she left Palo Alto, the sky was overcast, like the city knew she needed a dramatic exit. She drove out of the city with the back seat packed to the ceiling and her laptop balanced on the passenger seat, still logged into the Code Kindle dashboard. Notifications were pinging in. Zoe had pushed a UI update. A school in Texas wanted to beta test their first module. Things were moving. Emily wiped her eyes and turned up the volume on her Spotify playlist, nothing but instrumental film scores, her go-to thinking music. "You're not giving up," she whispered. "You're just betting on yourself." Her parents' house smelled like lemon pledge and microwave popcorn. The familiarity was comforting and stifling all at once. Her old bedroom looked the same, faded posters, dusty shelves, the desk where she built her first app. Her dad barely looked up when she walked in. He gave a nod and said, "Still doing that computer thing?" Emily gritted her teeth. "Yeah. Still doing that." He didn't respond. Just sipped his coffee and flipped the channel to a baseball game. Her mom pulled her in for a long hug. "Don't worry about him," she whispered. You're doing something amazing. Emily wanted to believe that. Really, she did. That night, as she sat cross-legged on her old bed, laptop glowing in the dark, Emily stared at the CodeKindle homepage. It was rough. Imperfect. Held together by duct tape and hope. But it was hers. And it was alive. She uploaded the latest build and checked the email inbox. One unread message. Subject, we'd like to talk. It was from a foundation that funded tech education startups. They'd seen her pitch deck from a contact of Ethan's. They wanted a meeting. Emily smiled, wiped away a tear, and whispered. Worth it. The Zoom call had been on the calendar for 3 days, but Emily still didn't feel ready. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, and she wore her most neutral blouse, the one that somehow still made her look like she had it together. Her background was carefully curated. Books, a plant, a sticky note that read, "You've got this," barely out of frame. At 9:59 a.m., the notification popped up. Christina Owens has joined the meeting. Emily took a breath, clicked join, and smiled. Hi, Christina. It's great to meet you. Christina Owens was the Director of Community Innovation at the ArcLight Foundation, a nonprofit that funded educational technology with a focus on underrepresented communities. Sharp, warm, and intimidating in the way that only someone who'd sat through hundreds of pitches could be. I heard about you through Ethan, Christina said. He speaks highly of you. That was unexpected. Emily grinned. That's great to hear. I appreciate you taking the time. Let's dive in, Christina said. Tell me about CodeKindle. Emily launched into the pitch. It was smoother now, practiced but still passionate. She explained the platform, the mission, the difference between CodeKindle and existing learning tools. She showed real student avatars, early lesson flow, and engagement tracking. She ended with a video of a 7th grade student from a pilot school in Austin who, after using CodeKindle's beta, had built a simple weather app and now wanted to learn Python. When the video faded to black, Christina said nothing for a moment. And then, that's powerful. Emily relaxed. Just a little. I'm not here to offer investment today, Christina continued, but we're exploring 3-month microgrants for projects like yours. If you're open to it, I'd like you to submit a full proposal. Emily blinked. Yes, she said quickly. Absolutely. I'll have it to you within the week. After the call, Emily screamed into a pillow. It wasn't a yes. But it was a maybe. A maybe from someone who mattered. She ran downstairs, where her mom was folding laundry. I think I might have just gotten our first funding opportunity, she said, almost breathless. Her mom grinned and pulled her into a hug. See? You're doing it. Her dad looked up from the kitchen table but didn't say anything. Just nodded. The same nod he gave the dog when it did something vaguely impressive. Still, it felt like a small victory. But every win seemed to arrive with a side of chaos. That afternoon, Zoe texted. We've got a bug. Lessons aren't saving progress. Kids are losing their work. Emily nearly dropped her phone. She jumped onto their platform and quickly confirmed it. Every user in the Texas school pilot had been affected. Days of progress, gone. Okay, Emily typed into their Slack. It's fine. We'll fix it. We just need to act fast. Within hours, Emily, Zoe, and Mark were deep in the back end, isolating the issue, running tests, and manually restoring data. They worked through the night. By 3 a.m., it was patched. By sunrise, user progress was 90% recovered. Emily sent a personal apology email to every teacher involved in the pilot. The principal of the Texas school replied first. Thanks for owning it. Honestly, the kids are still excited. They're learning resilience too. Emily stared at the message, stunned. She had expected anger. Instead, she got grace. That week, momentum picked up. 2 more schools expressed interest. Zoe redesigned the onboarding flow. Mark built a dashboard for teachers to track student milestones. Emily stayed up night after night refining the funding proposal for the ArcLight Foundation. But the real milestone came quietly, an email from a student. It was short. "Hi, I'm Tasha. I'm 13. I never thought I'd like coding, but your lessons made me feel smart. My older brother told me girls don't code, but I built a game yesterday and he actually said it was cool. Thanks." Smiley face. Emily read it 3 times. She forwarded it to the team with the subject line. This is why. But back at home, tensions were rising. Her dad had kept mostly quiet about her project, until now. At dinner, without warning, he said, "So how long's this startup experiment gonna last?" Emily froze, fork halfway to her mouth. "It's not an experiment," she said calmly. "It's a company. We've got live users. We're applying for grants." He scoffed. "Grants? Right. So, what, you're hoping strangers give you free money to play teacher?" Her mom jumped in. "Harold, stop. She's working hard." Emily set her fork down. "It's not play. It's work. Real work. Harder than anything I ever did in Silicon Valley." Her dad leaned back. "You had a real job. Health benefits. A paycheck. Now you're sitting in your childhood bedroom chasing pipe dreams." She stood up. "Pipe dreams change the world. You just don't recognize one when you see it." Silence. Her mom looked down. Her dad didn't respond. Emily walked out. Back in her room, her heart was pounding. She didn't cry. Not this time. She opened her laptop and clicked on the CodeKindle dashboard. 87 students. 5 pilot schools. 2 partnerships pending. 1 grant proposal submitted. Numbers that meant nothing to her father, but everything to her. She opened a new note and wrote the sentence she needed to see. "I am not here to be understood. I am here to build. Some offers change your life. Others change your soul. Know the difference." The email arrived at 2:08 a.m., just as Emily was about to close her laptop. Her eyes were dry from hours of staring at metrics, tweaking user flows, and replying to support requests from teachers still getting used to the CodeKindle system. But the subject line stopped her cold. Subject, Series Seed Opportunity, TechCore Ventures interested. She clicked. Inside was a short, direct message from Michael Thorne, partner at TechCore Ventures, a well-known seed-stage VC firm with a reputation for aggressive scaling. The kind of firm that could turn a startup into a household name, or chew it up and spit it out before the ink dried on the term sheet. Emily read the message again. "We came across CodeKindle through our network. There's real potential in your model. I'd like to schedule a call and explore funding options. Think $500,000 to $1 million range for a strong beta and growth strategy." Her hands shook. This wasn't another microgrant. This was real venture capital. The kind that could mean offices, a full-time team, a marketing budget, maybe even her own place again. Emily sat in silence for a full minute. Then she forwarded the email to Zoe with just one line. "Are we ready for this conversation?" Zoe replied instantly. "Hell yes." The next day, they set up a call with Michael. He was sharp, polished, and had clearly done his homework. "I'll be blunt," he said. "EdTech isn't usually our play. But you're not like the others. You've got an angle. Gamified learning. Diversity-first mission. Scalable potential." Emily tried to stay composed. "That's what we're hoping. But, he added, to really make this work, we'd want to help shape the direction. Rework some of the messaging. Maybe broaden your market. Focus less on underserved communities, more on general appeal. Bigger pie. There it was. She felt the shift instantly. He wasn't interested in Code Kindle as it was. He was interested in a version of it that looked more like every other platform, slicker, safer, and definitely less mission-driven. Michael continued. The heart is there. But to scale, you have to think mass market. I'm not saying drop the diversity angle, just dilute it. Less equity, more opportunity. Language matters. Emily's stomach turned. He said it casually, like he was suggesting a better font. After the call, Zoe didn't mince words. Nope. Nope, nope, nope. Not worth it. Emily sighed. It's $1 million check, Zoe. It's $1 million muzzle, she snapped. You think we can help underserved kids by watering down our purpose just to make VCs comfortable? Emily didn't respond right away. She got it. She agreed. But part of her, the tired, stressed, emotionally broke part, was tempted. The kind of funding Michael offered could take them from promising to dominant in a matter of months. But at what cost? She opened her journal later that night, the one she'd been keeping since this whole journey began. On the first page was the quote that sparked everything. If something is important enough, even if the odds are against you, you should still do it. Elon Musk. Not, if it's scalable enough. Not, if it appeals to the broadest audience. Just, important. She knew her answer. The next morning, Emily sent the reply. Hi Michael. Thank you for the interest and the conversation. At this time, we're choosing to pursue partners whose values align more closely with our core mission of equitable access to tech education. Wishing you the best. Emily Carter _ She hit send. And immediately felt free. No regrets. No second guessing. Just clarity. Later that day, Zoe messaged her. You're a badass. Proud of you. But the fallout came fast. Michael didn't respond directly, but Emily soon noticed a wave of sudden silence from mutual contacts. A speaking invite got postponed. A warm lead from a previous networking call ghosted. Clearly, word had gotten out that Code Kindle had rejected TechCore. Katie called that night. You okay? She asked. Emily was sitting cross-legged on her bed, sipping lukewarm tea. I said no to $1 million check today, she said. Katie laughed, then paused. And how do you feel? Strong, Emily said. Terrified. But strong. Katie's voice softened. That's how you know it was the right call. 2 days later, the universe responded. Christina from the Arclight Foundation emailed again. Subject, congratulations, grant approved. Emily screamed so loud her mom thought something terrible had happened. The foundation was offering a $50,000 grant. Not VC money, but it came with zero equity taken, full autonomy, and 3 months of support from a network of mission-aligned mentors. She called Zoe immediately. We've got our runway. Zoe whooped. Let's go. Let's build the version of this thing we believe in. That weekend, Emily wrote a blog post titled, Why We Said No to $1 Million Investment. She explained the power of saying no. The importance of mission over money. The non-negotiables. The post went viral on LinkedIn. A week later, she had 5 new schools signed up for pilot programs. 2 female-led VC funds reached out for future conversations. And dozens of messages from teachers, parents, and young founders flooded her inbox. One line stood out. Thank you for reminding us that you can grow without selling your soul. Emily Carter's fingers hovered over the trackpad as she stared at the whiteboard in the Zoom meeting. It was filled with color-coded arrows, data loops, sticky notes, and a big red circle in the center labeled "Break the model." It was Zoe's idea. "The way we're doing this, it's not enough," Zoe said. "These bite-sized lessons. The gamified badges. It's all still built on the same old school logic. Sit down, follow steps, hope you retain it. That's not how kids learn anymore. That's not how we learned." Emily nodded slowly. "So what are you suggesting?" Zoe grinned. "We stop pretending we're just an edtech company. Let's build a movement. Let's create a space where kids don't just learn to code, they become creators." The proposal was radical. Instead of continuing with linear courses and leveled progressions like most platforms, Zoe wanted to launch an entirely new feature inside CodeKindle, the Creator Lab. A sandbox experience. Students could build anything: games, tools, art, using modular code blocks, real-time feedback, and peer collaboration. Think Roblox meets Codecademy meets Duolingo. The system would adjust based on what the student was building and why, not just what they got right. It was risky. Expensive. Wildly ambitious. Which meant Emily couldn't stop thinking about it. Over the next 2 weeks, the team poured everything into prototyping the Creator Lab. Zoe designed the flow. Mark worked through the back-end logic. Emily wrote copy, tested user scenarios, and started building a feedback loop with the pilot schools. She reached out to every teacher she could. "If your students could create anything using code, what would it be?" The answers stunned her. "A student in my class wants to make a quiz for her little brother about dinosaurs. One kid wants to create a virtual shop to sell his grandma's tamale recipe. A girl in Detroit asked if she could build an app to help her friend with dyslexia read aloud." This wasn't just coding. This was empowerment. But not everyone was on board. During a mentor check-in through the ArcLight Foundation, one advisor, a retired product exec from a major tech company, gave a long pause after Emily shared the Creator Lab idea. "It's interesting," he said. "But you're going too fast. You haven't even nailed product market fit with your base platform." Emily felt herself tighten. "I get that," she replied. "But if we're just another linear edtech tool, we're not changing anything. We're just polishing the same old system." He raised an eyebrow. "Just don't lose the plot trying to be revolutionary. Focus on scale, then innovation." After the call, Emily sat quietly in her chair for a long time. She wasn't sure who was right. That night, she went on a walk to clear her head. Her parents' street was quiet. Dim porch lights glowed. A dog barked in the distance. She pulled out her phone and opened one of her saved notes, a quote from Musk she kept for moments like this. "Some people don't like change, but you need to embrace change if the alternative is disaster." What was the disaster? In Emily's mind, it was launching another product that looked and felt like every other platform, one that didn't inspire. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, she called a team meeting. "We're building the Creator Lab," she said. "And we're not waiting." Zoe grinned. Mark didn't say much, he never did, but he gave a subtle thumbs up. Emily continued, "We'll roll it out to just one classroom first. Controlled test. Then we expand. I'll handle the school comms. Zoe, you take UX, Mark, make it bulletproof." It was go time. 2 weeks later, they launched the Creator Lab pilot at a middle school in Atlanta. A tech-savvy teacher named Ms. Hill volunteered her 7th grade class to be the first testers. The rollout was messy. The server lagged. A login bug blocked half the class for the first hour. One student built a broken game that accidentally crashed the browser. Another discovered a loophole and turned her avatar into a giant floating head. But despite the chaos, the response was electric. "They're obsessed," Ms. Hill emailed later that night. "I've never seen them so engaged. They don't want to stop. I'm not even giving them assignments anymore, they're giving me ideas. Emily sat back, stunned. It was working. A week later, they released the Creator Lab to 3 more schools. Then 5. Then 10. Kids were building things no one expected. A voting simulator for classroom debates. A choose-your-own-adventure game about bullying. A virtual museum for Black inventors in STEM. They weren't just coding. They were expressing themselves. Solving problems. Telling stories. Emily cried the first time she saw a student demo a project during a school-wide assembly. A tiny 6th grader named Jaden stood in front of 200 students and showed off his game, The Cleanup Crew, about saving a neighborhood from pollution. I made it because our park always has trash in it, he said, and I want people to care. Emily watched from the back of the auditorium, overwhelmed. This was the vision. But with growth came new problems. Server costs exploded. Customer support requests tripled. Zoe was overwhelmed. Mark burned out and needed to take a week off. Emily was juggling grant reports, product meetings, school partnerships, and internal crisis management all at once. For the first time, she felt herself slipping, snapping at Zoe in meetings, missing emails, forgetting to eat. Her mom found her one night asleep at the kitchen table, still clutching her laptop. "Honey," she said softly. "You can't lead a revolution if you collapse in the middle of it." Emily woke up in a haze and nodded. She had to regroup. Delegate. Led smarter. This wasn't just her project anymore. It was their mission. Everyone wants the breakthrough. No one wants the breakdown that comes first. Emily couldn't remember the last time she'd slept more than 4 hours. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Slack. Email. Calendly. Notifications from the CodeKindle backend. Messages from panicked teachers. A bug report from a district partner. Another request for a live demo. She hadn't left her house in 3 days. Her room, once a space of creativity, now looked like a war zone. Sticky notes were everywhere. Open granola bar wrappers. A coffee mug with some science experiment growing inside. Her laptop charger tangled around a half-unpacked box she never finished organizing. Somewhere outside her door, her parents were arguing in hushed voices again. "She's pushing herself too hard. She's an adult, Susan. If she wants to burn herself out, let her." Emily shut her eyes. She didn't want to admit it, but her dad wasn't wrong. The success of Creator Lab had brought a new kind of storm. Overnight, schools across the country started reaching out. Parents wanted access for their kids. Local news stations ran features on the app that's giving power back to the classroom. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like suffocation. The more praise they got, the more Emily felt the pressure mount. She couldn't keep up. Zoe was swamped trying to improve the UI. Mark was still recovering from burnout. They'd onboard 2 new part-time devs, but neither of them knew the system well enough to handle the deeper logic. That left Emily holding everything else: strategy, growth, support, PR, and partnership talks. She started making mistakes. Forgetting meetings. Miscommunicating tasks. Snapping at Zoe in Slack. One night, after sending a curt, "just fix it," reply during a tense bug thread, Zoe messaged her privately. "Zoe. Hey. I'm saying this as a friend. You're not okay. You're trying to carry too much and it's showing. You need to take a breath. Or we're gonna lose you." Emily stared at the message for 5 minutes. She didn't reply. She just closed her laptop and curled up on her bed. The next morning, disaster struck. A new build went live with a critical bug in the Creator Lab save system. Over 500 student projects vanished. Emily's inbox exploded. Teachers were furious. One school threatened to cancel their pilot altogether. Emily panicked. She tried to triage the issue while answering emails, talking to developers, updating the affected schools, and prepping for a partnership call with a state education official, all at once. It didn't work. In the middle of the partnership call, she froze. Her mouth moved but no words came out. Her vision blurred. "Emily," the official said. "Are you okay?" She mumbled something about needing to reschedule and ended the call. Her hands were shaking. She walked out of the room. Straight down the stairs. And into her backyard. She collapsed onto the grass and cried. Loud, messy, guttural sobs. She had hit her limit. Later that evening, her mom came and sat beside her on the porch. "Sweetie," she said gently, "what are you chasing?" Emily didn't answer. Her mom continued, "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're running from something just as much as you're running toward it." Emily wiped her eyes. I can't fail. I can't. These kids are counting on us. I'm not building a company, I'm building hope." Her mom took her hand. "I know. But hope can't grow if you're running on empty." That night, for the first time in weeks, Emily slept. The next day, she called an emergency team meeting. Zoe, Mark, the two part-time devs. Even her high school intern, Danny, joined in. Emily took a breath. "I owe all of you an apology," she said. "I've been trying to be Elon Musk, but I forgot that even Musk has a team. I've made mistakes. I've dropped balls. I've acted like this thing depends on me alone, but it doesn't. Not anymore." Silence. Then Zoe smiled. "Took you long enough to figure that out." They laughed. Emily continued. "Starting today, I'm delegating more. No more 2 a.m. emails. No more ego. Just mission. We build this together. Or we don't build it at all." The shift was immediate. Zoe took ownership of all external school communications. Mark resumed back-end lead responsibilities but worked set hours only, no nights. Emily hired a part-time operations coordinator using the grant funds. Danny took over support tickets and social media. Emily started walking again. Sleeping again. Eating meals that weren't microwaved at 1 a.m. She even took a weekend off to visit her sister in Minneapolis. First time in nearly a year she left work behind. No laptop. No Slack. Just real air, real conversation, and the reminder that she was a human being first. When she returned, she was clearer than ever. She didn't want to do everything. She wanted to build something worth doing together. At their next team retro, Zoe led a new ritual, the win round. Each person had to share one thing they were proud of from the last 2 weeks. Danny, "I answered a parent's email in Spanish and they said it made them feel seen." Mark, "I fixed that security vulnerability before anyone noticed." Zoe, "I made a teacher cry. In a good way. She said her students come to school excited for the first time." Emily, "I let go. And the world didn't fall apart." They all clapped. Then Zoe said, "Actually, it got better." Emily smiled. She felt something shift. Not just in the company. In her. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Sometimes, growth isn't about going bigger. It's about going deeper. Emily sat across from Dr. Lillian Grant, CEO of the United Learning Network, one of the largest nonprofit education collaboratives in the country. They were in a sunlit co-working space in D.C., coffee cups between them, a Code Kindle demo looping quietly on a tablet nearby. Outside, the city buzzed. Inside, everything felt still. Dr. Grant had listened intently for the last 40 minutes. She didn't interrupt. She didn't smile too much. She was the kind of leader who held space like a mountain. And now, she leaned in. Emily, what you've built is remarkable. And it's already changing lives. But I believe it could change systems, if you're willing to take a leap. Emily felt her pulse quicken. Dr. Grant slid a folder across the table. Inside, a detailed partnership proposal. We want to adopt Code Kindle into our national initiative, Project Phoenix. That means full funding for scaling into over 1,000 public schools in the next 18 months. We'd bring in resources, staff, infrastructure. Everything you need to scale responsibly. Emily blinked. 1,000 schools. Fully funded. Backed by an organization with real reach. Real credibility. But, Dr. Grant added, there's a catch. Of course there was. Over lunch, they went through the terms. United Learning didn't want to buy Code Kindle. They wanted to absorb it, fold it into their ecosystem. That meant merging teams. Shared ownership of IP. Leadership by committee. Emily would still have a significant voice, but she wouldn't be the sole driver anymore. The vision? Still hers. The execution? Shared. You wouldn't be the founder of a startup anymore, Dr. Grant said gently. You'd be the architect of a movement. Emily didn't say anything. She just stared at her coffee. That night, back in her hotel room, Emily paced. This wasn't a fork in the road. It was a cliff. Saying yes meant reaching more kids, faster than she ever dreamed possible. It also meant letting go of full control, of being the CEO, the captain, the singular name behind the brand. Saying no meant staying small. Staying scrappy. Possibly taking years to reach the same level of impact. Zoe called. So. How was it? Emily exhaled. It's huge. It's everything. But it's also everything changing. She heard the hesitation in Zoe's voice. You okay with that? I don't know, Emily admitted. I'm scared that if we merge, the vision might get diluted. Zoe was quiet. Then, maybe. Or maybe it finally grows the way it was meant to. Maybe the only thing holding it back now, is us trying to carry it alone. Emily took a long walk through the city that night. She passed monuments built by generations, each one an idea that outlived its maker. She thought about her students, their voices, their creations, their messages. She remembered Jaden's pollution cleanup game. Tasha's confidence boost. The girl in Detroit who wanted to build an app for dyslexia. This was never about her. It was always about them. She sat on a bench and opened her notebook. This isn't about being the face of a company. It's about building something that will live beyond me. That means letting go of ego, and holding tighter to the mission. By midnight, she had her answer. The next morning, she met with Dr. Grant again. Yes, she said, her voice clear. But on one condition. Dar. Grant raised an eyebrow. Emily slid a note across the table. It read. Code Kindle must remain free for Title I schools. Forever. Non-negotiable. Dr. Grant read it, then nodded. Deal. They shook hands. In that moment, Emily didn't feel smaller. She felt free. When Emily returned home, the team gathered on a Zoom call. Zoe looked nervous. Mark had his "what's happening now" face on. Danny was literally eating popcorn. Emily smiled. We've just been invited into the biggest classroom in the country, she said. We're partnering with United Learning. Code Kindle is going national. There was silence. Then Zoe burst into a grin. Holy crap. Mark actually smiled. Danny spilled popcorn. Emily laughed. We're not just a startup anymore. We're part of a movement. She took a deep breath. And I need all of you now more than ever. The next 6 weeks were a whirlwind. Lawyers. Press releases. Integration teams. Meetings with curriculum directors. Design sprints with district tech leads. Code Kindle was no longer Emily's alone, but it was bigger than it had ever been. She flew to 3 states in 10 days. Walked through schools that had never used a learning app before. Met principals who wept after seeing how their students used Creator Lab to share their lives in code. At one school in New Mexico, a boy named Luis pulled her aside. "Ms. Carter," he said quietly, "when I grow up, I want to be just like you. I want to make something that helps people feel like they matter." She didn't cry then. But later, on the plane ride home, she did. You can change the system, or the system can change you. The celebration didn't last long. Barely 2 months into Code Kindle's partnership with the United Learning Network, Emily was already knee-deep in the harsh reality of scale. She had traded the freedom of a scrappy startup for meetings, lots of them. Policy briefings. Curriculum alignment sessions. Compliance reviews. The kind of language that didn't come from classrooms but from conference rooms in buildings with marble floors. And with it came new stakeholders. Politicians. Superintendents. Union reps, corporate sponsors. Some supported her. Some smiled politely. Others, like the deputy director of EdTech Standards, saw her as that idealistic startup girl who got lucky. "You're not in beta anymore," he told her. "You're in the system now. You'll need to play by its rules." Emily stared at him across the table and thought. "You don't even know the rules I'm trying to rewrite." The first battle came over content. A state board in the South flagged a lesson about activism in one of the Creator Lab projects. The student had created a simulation game called March for Change, where players navigated peaceful protests while avoiding obstacles like misinformation or unjust arrests. It was creative. Powerful. Raw. Too raw, apparently. "We need to review whether content like this is appropriate for middle school students," the district official emailed. "We'd prefer Code Kindle stay focused on academic outcomes, not social messaging." Emily's blood boiled. She drafted a scathing reply, but stopped. She remembered what Zoe had said early on. "If we go down in flames, let it be for something that mattered." She rewrote the email. Respectful, firm, but unapologetic. "Our mission is to empower student voice. That means allowing them to code the world they see, not just the one we're comfortable with. We can't teach creativity and ask them to silence their truth." She hit send. No reply. 3 days later, the district quietly pulled out of the pilot. Zoe called that night. "They dropped us, huh?" she asked. "Yeah. You okay?" "I'm mad," Emily admitted. "But no regrets." Zoe paused. "We didn't come this far to be safe." But the cracks kept showing. Some schools complained that the Creator Lab was too open-ended. "Our students need structure, not freedom. This doesn't fit our test prep objectives. Can't they just learn to code JavaScript?" Emily felt her vision being chipped away, one concern at a time. To some, Code Kindle was a spark. To others, it was a disruption they didn't want. Worse, inside the new team, tensions were rising. A newly assigned program manager from United Learning, Susan Draper, MBA, Harvard, began suggesting product adjustments to align with statewide edtech frameworks. "We should reduce the creative modules by 40% and focus on coding fundamentals. That's what gets funded." Emily pushed back. "That's not what gets kids excited." Susan's tone tightened. "Emily, we brought you into this partnership because of your passion. But passion isn't a strategy." That stung. Mark called one night after a long dev sprint. "Hey," he said quietly. "Am I coding the dream? Or just keeping up with compliance checklists now?" Emily didn't have an answer. She stared at the Creator Lab's new roadmap, half of which she hadn't written. Features were being streamlined. Language was being softened. The magic was thinning. The movement she had poured her soul into was in danger of being watered down by the very institutions she had once dreamed of disrupting. One weekend, Emily flew to Chicago for a school visit. No press. No board members. Just her, a classroom, and a teacher named Mr. Rosario who had gone rogue. He ignored the standard curriculum and let his students explore CodeKindle however they wanted. The results were breathtaking. One group had built a storytelling app where students could write stories in English and code them into interactive experiences. Another group had created a digital pet rescue game based on a local shelter. One girl made a chatbot that offered positive affirmations to classmates who were feeling down. Mr. Rosario leaned over and whispered, "This is what school is supposed to feel like." Emily almost cried. On the flight back, she made a decision. She couldn't save every district. She couldn't win every battle. But she could protect the heart of what they built. She called a full team meeting that Monday morning. "Look," she said, voice firm. "I know things are changing. And not always in ways we like. But here's the line I won't cross: we don't sacrifice student voice for adult comfort. We don't gut our mission to get another checkmark on a grant form." The room went quiet. Then Zoe nodded. "So what's that mean?" "It means we push back. Every time. Gracefully, but unapologetically. And if a district drops us for letting kids tell the truth, then we let them go." Mark added, "And if they try to replace Creator Lab with drills?" Emily didn't flinch. "We rebuild it somewhere else." They added a new line to the CodeKindle team charter. "We protect the creative freedom of kids, no matter how uncomfortable it makes adults." It wasn't easy. Emily had more tense calls. More rejections. More bruises. But the schools that stayed, they doubled down. They spread the word. And new partners began approaching, not because they wanted to change CodeKindle, but because they wanted to change with it. The world's most dangerous lie: you can't. Emily stood backstage, the hum of the television studio barely breaking through her focus. The bright lights, the murmurs of crew members preparing, the low buzz of conversations, it all seemed so distant. She wasn't thinking about any of it. She was thinking about the question. How could she prove that CodeKindle was still worthy of its mission, when everything, it seemed, was being designed to stop her? A week ago, CodeKindle had been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. A local media outlet had accused her of pushing radical agendas in schools. They had twisted the story, portraying CodeKindle's focus on student creativity as unregulated and dangerous. The backlash had spread like wildfire. First came the editorial from a conservative think tank. Parents should be concerned about the influence of tools like CodeKindle. Are we giving our children the freedom to learn, or the freedom to think differently? Then, a senator from her home state, one who had previously championed education reform, publicly distanced himself from her project. We cannot let personal beliefs dictate what happens in the classroom. Kids need education, not social experiments. Emily felt the weight of the criticisms, but what really burned was the fear in the eyes of her team. Susan Draper, the program manager, had been particularly vocal. "Emily, I don't know if we're ready for this kind of publicity. It's turning into a PR nightmare. We might lose our funding." And then, the worst of it, the most hurtful. Mark, her trusted lead developer, pulled her aside one night. "Are we really ready for this fight?" he asked, his voice a quiet whisper. "Because it feels like we're about to crash, Emily. And I don't know if we can come back from it." That was why, when she got the call from the producer of the popular daytime news show, Voices of Tomorrow, she had said yes. "It's a chance to set the record straight, Emily," the producer said. "Our audience needs to hear your side. You've got a platform. You've got the chance to show people what this is really about." It was an opportunity, a way to speak to millions of parents, teachers, and students who might feel the same way she did. But it came with a price. Now, standing backstage, Emily took a deep breath. She could feel the tension in the pit of her stomach, but she also felt something else, a deep, unshakable conviction. She wasn't just defending an app. She was defending an idea. An idea that kids, regardless of their background, their zip code, or their school district, had a right to use their voices. A right to create and speak their truths. A right to dream bigger than the system they were told to conform to. The host of Voices of Tomorrow, Elliot Hayes, was a respected figure. He had a reputation for being tough, but fair. The kind of interviewer who didn't pull punches. She had seen him ask hard questions before. His first question, she knew, would be about the accusations that CodeKindle's emphasis on student activism was too controversial. It was a question she was prepared for. As she was led onto the set, she gave herself one last piece of advice, something Elon Musk had once said that resonated deeply. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. The cameras turned on. Elliot Hayes' warm, but serious gaze met Emily's. "Welcome to the show, Emily. Thank you for being here." "Thanks for having me," Emily replied, her voice calm but steady. "Now, I'm sure many of our viewers are familiar with CodeKindle. It's a tool for teaching coding to kids. But recently, it's been making headlines for reasons other than the tech. Accusations of pushing political agendas in classrooms, sparking controversy in districts. What do you say to that?" Emily took a breath. She could feel the pressure. This was a pivotal moment. It wasn't about her. It wasn't about defending CodeKindle. It was about defending the future of the kids she had dedicated her life to. "Elliot, CodeKindle is about one thing, giving kids a platform to express themselves through technology. We don't tell them what to think, we teach them how to think. How to problem solve. How to create solutions for the challenges they see in their own lives." She paused, making sure her words landed. Yes, some students use CodeKindle to explore social issues. Some of them have written stories about climate change, coded projects about mental health awareness, and even built games to address economic inequality. And I'm proud of them for it. Elliot raised an eyebrow. But surely, there are critics who argue that children shouldn't be engaging in these kinds of complex topics at such an early age. That it's too much too soon. Emily leaned in, her voice steady. "These are their issues, Elliot. Our kids live in a world where they face these things every day. If we don't give them the tools to process those experiences, we're doing them a disservice. Teaching kids to code isn't just about teaching them to build websites or apps. It's about teaching them how to build their futures, and to understand the world they're going to change." There was a pause. Emily could see Elliot was considering her words carefully. "But surely there's a balance, Emily. Where does CodeKindle draw the line? At what point does freedom of expression become indoctrination?" It was a valid question. A tough one. Emily thought for a moment, then responded. "We don't tell kids what to believe. We give them the space to ask questions. To explore. And yes, to challenge the status quo. If that makes some people uncomfortable, that's okay. Our job is to empower the next generation, not control it." Elliot smiled slightly. "Fair enough. But do you worry about the responsibility that comes with such a powerful tool? That CodeKindle might be misused in ways you didn't intend?" Emily felt a weight settle on her shoulders, but she refused to flinch. "The same could be said about any tool, Elliot. Books, social media, the internet. We can't control how people use things, but we can give them the education to use them wisely. And that's what we're doing. The segment ended, and the cameras went dark. As Emily walked off the set, she didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel defeated either. She felt something else, a quiet confidence. She knew the fight wasn't over. But that was fine. She was ready. The hardest thing to do is often the one that will make all the difference. After the media whirlwind, Emily expected things to quiet down. But instead, Code Kindle's name was splashed across more headlines, fueling both support and outrage. It felt like the whole world was watching. But rather than sink under the pressure, Emily began to notice a shift. The storm, as fierce as it was, had ignited something in others, a sense of urgency, a recognition that what she was doing mattered. It started with Sarah, a middle school teacher in Cleveland. Sarah had reached out to Emily through the Code Kindle platform, sending a simple, heartfelt message. "I don't know what's happening out there with all the media drama, but I wanted to thank you. I've been using Code Kindle with my students for a year now, and it's changed everything. My students are more excited than I've ever seen them. They're thinking, creating, solving problems. They're engaged in ways I never thought possible." Emily's heart skipped a beat. And then came Aiden, a 15-year-old student from Philadelphia, whose email was a breath of fresh air. "I just want to say thanks for letting us make games about mental health. I coded one about feeling depressed and talking to people who understand. It's helping people in my school. I never thought coding could be about something real." It wasn't just the messages from students and teachers. Suddenly, Emily found herself in conversations with other ed-tech entrepreneurs who were experiencing similar pushback. One afternoon, she got a call from Nia, the founder of a startup focused on virtual classrooms. "I'm watching you from here, Emily," Nia said, her voice bright but serious. "And you're not alone in this. We're getting pushback from the same systems. But we can't be afraid of it anymore. We need to be bold." The call was a wake-up call for Emily. For months, she had been playing defense, reacting to criticism, trying to explain why Code Kindle's mission was worthy. But now, something had shifted. She didn't have to apologize anymore. The world was evolving, and so was the demand for change. She and Nia talked about how they could start pushing for that change, together. They brainstormed about a larger movement, one where educators, entrepreneurs, and students could come together to demand more room for creativity, critical thinking, and freedom in schools. They decided to meet in person, in just a few days, to figure out how to turn this momentum into something bigger. But as Emily prepared for the meeting with Nia, a new problem surfaced: funding. United Learning was getting nervous. "We can't keep going like this, Emily. The pushback from local districts is starting to affect our bottom line," Susan Draper said on another one of their weekly check-ins. "I don't understand." "Our metrics are solid," Emily replied, her voice tight with frustration. "Teachers are using the tool. Kids are engaged. We're changing lives. Why is that a problem?" Susan hesitated. "It's not a problem, but the corporate backers are getting nervous. They don't want to risk too much. They want stability." Emily wasn't sure what to say. She felt as though she were walking on a tightrope, balancing her mission with the ever-present need for resources. At that moment, Emily thought back to the countless conversations she'd had with Elon Musk during those late nights of the rocket launches. She remembered the way he never backed down when people told him he couldn't build rockets. The way he seemed to believe that the biggest challenges were the ones worth tackling. If Elon could risk his entire fortune on SpaceX and Tesla, Emily could certainly risk her company for the mission she believed in. The next day, Emily called an emergency meeting with her leadership team. "We need to decide something right now," she started, her voice determined. "If we scale back to appease our backers, we'll lose everything we've built." Code Kindle was never about just making money, it was about changing the way kids learn and think. If we back down now, we're no better than the system we were trying to change. Mark, her lead developer, looked at her with unwavering support. I'm with you. We signed up for this mission, and we're not turning back. Later that week, Emily received a call from Jonas, an investor who had always been more of a silent backer. She didn't know him well, but she knew he was the one who had believed in her from the start. I've been watching the media coverage, Emily, Jonas said. I know things are difficult. I want to be upfront with you, I can pull the plug if this gets too heated. It's a risky venture. There was a long silence. Emily knew exactly what she had to do. I understand, Jonas. But here's what I want you to know, I'm not asking for your investment because of the risk. I'm asking for it because this mission is important. We're not changing the world by playing it safe. If you believe in what we're doing, then stay with us. If not, I'll find another way. That night, as Emily prepared for the meeting with Nia, she realized something important. She was no longer just a startup founder. She had become an advocate for something far bigger than herself. This wasn't about getting validation from corporate backers or media approval. This was about creating a space where kids could finally feel empowered, where they could break free from the narrow confines of traditional education and do things that mattered to them. And if she had to face every obstacle head-on, then so be it. When Nia arrived in town, they met in a small conference room with whiteboards and coffee cups. They quickly dove into the details of how they could band together to form a larger movement, a new kind of education advocacy. It was clear that this wasn't just about tech anymore. It was about redefining the purpose of education itself. The plan was bold. We're going to launch a nationwide campaign, Emily said. We'll work with teachers, students, parents, and educators to demand a change in how we approach learning. And we'll use our platforms to spread the message. Nia was all in. This is what we've been waiting for. Let's take this fight to the people. Emily spent the next few weeks preparing for the campaign. They organized petitions, reached out to key education influencers, and got stories from teachers who had successfully used Code Kindle to give their students more agency. They gathered testimonials from students who had created real-world solutions with their code. And most importantly, they made sure that the voices of those who needed it the most, the kids, were at the forefront of everything they did. Emily stood before a packed room of educators, activists, and students. It was her first major public appearance since the launch of Code Kindle's advocacy campaign, and the energy in the room was electrifying. Banners hung on the walls, proclaiming the campaign's message, Reimagine Education. Empower the future. The campaign had taken off faster than Emily could have imagined. Teachers had rallied to the cause, sharing stories of their students' successes with Code Kindle, while students, the true heart of the movement, had begun organizing their own events and creating their own content to support the cause. It was clear that Emily wasn't alone in this fight, the momentum had reached a boiling point. But there was still one major hurdle left, the school boards. Over the past few weeks, Emily had become well acquainted with the various school boards and their stringent rules. These boards controlled access to classrooms, and their approval was necessary for Code Kindle to reach even more students. But what Emily hadn't anticipated was the level of resistance that the boards would throw at her. The tools you're offering, one board member had said during a meeting, are too disruptive to the standard curriculum. We can't afford to let our children get sidetracked with social projects that might go against the values we teach. Emily had heard these kinds of statements many times before. The message was clear: Code Kindle, with its focus on creativity and real-world problem-solving, was too bold for a system that valued conformity and tradition. But Emily knew something the board members didn't: the world was changing, and the system needed to change with it. As Emily prepared to meet with a particularly influential school board in a major metropolitan area, she reflected on everything she had learned so far. The media storm, the doubts, the setbacks. Each moment had taught her something invaluable. The world was pushing back against her idea, but that was precisely why she had to push forward. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Mia. "Have you seen the new article on us? They're calling us radicals, Emily. We might be shaking the system too much." Emily smiled at the text. It wasn't the first time Code Kindle had been called radical, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. She knew that true innovation often faced this kind of backlash. And that's exactly why she had to keep pushing. The meeting with the school board started off predictably. The members sat around a large wooden table, their expressions skeptical as they watched Emily stand at the front of the room, armed with slides and statistics. She presented the data. Students who used Code Kindle scored higher on standardized tests, engaged more in their studies, and developed critical thinking skills that went far beyond simple coding. "This is not about teaching students to code," she said firmly. "It's about teaching them to think for themselves. To solve problems. To create their own futures." One board member, a man named Gregory Hill, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I get it, Emily," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But we don't need to be teaching our kids to rebel. We need structure. We need discipline. Your program teaches them to question authority. And that's not how we do things here." Emily's heart raced. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She could feel the weight of his words pressing against her. But instead of backing down, she stood taller. "Mr. Hill, what you call rebellion, I call empowerment. These kids are growing up in a world where the old rules no longer apply. They need to be taught to ask questions, to challenge the status quo, and to think critically. This isn't about undermining authority. It's about creating a generation that isn't afraid to make their own choices." There was a long silence in the room. The other members seemed to consider her words, but Gregory Hill wasn't ready to give in. "Well, we have a responsibility to our community. To our parents. We can't afford to let our schools become breeding grounds for this radical thinking." He put air quotes around the word radical, as if it were an accusation. Emily felt a surge of frustration, but she knew she couldn't let it show. Instead, she turned the tables. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Hill," she said, choosing her words carefully. "But let me ask you something. What happens when we don't allow students to think freely? What happens when we stifle their creativity and limit their ability to solve problems? We're preparing them for a world that doesn't exist anymore. I believe our job is to prepare them for the world they will inherit." The room fell into another heavy silence. Emily could see that she wasn't winning over Gregory Hill. But she didn't need to win him. She needed to win the room. She turned her attention to the rest of the board members, some of whom seemed to be quietly nodding along with her. "I'm not asking you to abandon structure. I'm asking you to add something to the equation. Give our students the tools to create and lead. Give them a chance to make their own mark. Because if we don't, we're doing them a disservice." After a tense few minutes, the board began to discuss. There were still objections, but they were quieter now, more thoughtful. Emily felt a shift in the room. This wasn't going to be an easy victory, but it was still a victory. Her message was starting to take root. It wasn't long before Gregory Hill spoke again. "We'll have to discuss this further with the rest of the board, but I'll be honest, this has given me a lot to think about. I can't promise anything today, but I will say, your message isn't falling on deaf ears." Emily smiled, her nerves suddenly calming. The meeting ended, and as she walked out of the room, Emily felt a sense of cautious optimism. She wasn't sure where things would go from here, but for the first time in a long time, she felt as though she had made a difference. Later that evening, as Emily prepared for a new round of meetings, she got a call from Mia. "How did it go?" Mia asked eagerly. Emily smiled. "I think we're making progress." The hardest times often lead to the greatest breakthroughs. The relief from her victory with the school board was fleeting. The very next morning, Emily faced an even more pressing challenge. Code Kindle's main investor, United Learning, was pulling back on their funding. We're concerned about the stability of the platform, Emily. Susan Draper's voice was tight over the phone. There are too many unknowns with the way things are evolving. You've been doing great work, but the financial risk is too high now. We've made the decision to scale back our investment. Emily felt as though the floor had been ripped out from beneath her. The previous night's triumph with the school board now seemed like a distant memory. Susan, I understand the concerns, but we're in the middle of something important here. Code Kindle isn't just a product, it's a movement. We're changing the way kids learn, and you can't just pull out now. Susan sighed, and Emily could hear the fatigue in her voice. I wish it were that simple. The investors want something more traditional. We're just not sure Code Kindle is going to meet that expectation long term. Emily's mind raced. This was it, the moment when everything could crumble. She had worked so hard to build this platform, to give students the chance to be creative, to think critically, to innovate. She couldn't let it slip away because of a few financial setbacks. But there was a bigger, looming threat, a competitor. Emily had heard rumors of a rival company, Instructify, that was developing a cheaper, more traditional version of Code Kindle. They were promising quick results, with a polished interface that was easy to integrate into existing school systems. It was a tempting solution for districts that didn't want to disrupt the status quo. And it was clear that Instructify had the backing of some very powerful investors. Emily knew that if Instructify gained traction, Code Kindle would be in serious trouble. The fight she had been waging was about to get even tougher. She called Nia immediately. Nia, we've got a problem. United Learning is pulling out, and I'm hearing that Instructify is about to launch a competitor that could kill us. There was a brief pause on the line. You can't be serious, Nia responded. They can't just replace us with something like that. They can, Emily said, her voice heavy. And they will if we don't act fast. The next few days were a blur of meetings, calls, and strategy sessions. Emily and Nia brainstormed a counterattack. They couldn't compete with Instructify on price, not without losing the very essence of what made Code Kindle special. So they had to focus on what they could offer that Instructify couldn't: creativity, depth, and purpose. It was late one evening when Emily came up with a breakthrough idea: a live, interactive coding tournament where students could use Code Kindle to solve real-world problems in real time. The tournament would be broadcast live, with expert mentors guiding the students, and the whole world could see what they were capable of. We've got to show the world what these kids can do, Emily said to Nia, her eyes sparkling with excitement. We'll let the students take the stage, not just as coders, but as innovators. This will be more than a competition, it'll be a statement. Nia was on board immediately. Let's make this happen. We can't wait for permission. We need to show the world that what we're doing is not just another app. This is the future of learning. In the following weeks, they pulled together a team of developers, marketing experts, and educators to launch the tournament. They reached out to companies like Tesla, SpaceX, and other innovators in the tech world to sponsor the event and provide mentorship to the students. They even invited Elon Musk to participate, though he was notoriously hard to reach. The pressure was intense, but Emily felt the weight of the moment. If this worked, it would be a game changer. If it didn't, she wasn't sure what would happen. The days leading up to the event were some of the most stressful of Emily's life. There were moments of doubt, moments when she thought everything was falling apart. And then, there was the reality check: she didn't have the kind of resources Instructify had. They had more money, more backing, and more stability. But they didn't have the passion. And they didn't have the vision that Code Kindle did. Emily spent sleepless nights reviewing every detail of the tournament, testing every line of code, preparing speeches, and organizing interviews. The world was about to see the full extent of what Code Kindle was capable of. On the day of the tournament, Emily stood backstage, watching the first round of students take their seats at their computers. There were hundreds of live viewers tuning in, many of whom had heard about the event through social media or word of mouth. The atmosphere was electric. "You've got this," Nia said, standing beside her, giving her a reassuring smile. "This is it, Emily. This is the breakthrough." The first challenge began. Students from across the country were tasked with designing a program to solve a real-world issue, a natural disaster simulation, where they had to code a system to assist first responders. It was challenging, it was messy, but it was pure creativity in action. Emily watched in awe as the students worked through the problems, collaborating with each other, coding with focus, and using the platform's tools in ways she hadn't anticipated. The students weren't just solving problems, they were creating solutions. The tournament went live on social media, and within hours, the hashtag #CodeKindle challenge was trending. Mentors from the world's top companies, including Tesla engineers, jumped in to offer their feedback and advice. The energy was contagious. Then, an hour into the competition, something unexpected happened. A live video appeared on Emily's phone. It was a message from Elon Musk. "Hi, Emily," he began, his voice calm but deliberate. "I've been following your work, and I just wanted to say one thing: keep pushing. The world needs what you're doing. Don't let anyone tell you it's too hard. Because what you're doing, it's the future." The words hit Emily like a wave. She felt her resolve strengthen in that moment. "You've got this, Emily," Nia whispered. And at that moment, Emily knew she did. Success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts. The final moments of the CodeKindle tournament had been nothing short of breathtaking. Emily had watched as the winning team, a group of high school students from a small town in New Mexico, delivered a flawless disaster response simulation that left the judges in awe. Their code wasn't just functional, it was creative, intuitive, and scalable. "This is the future," one of the judges from Tesla had said. "These kids could change the world." As the winners were crowned and the applause echoed throughout the room, Emily could feel her heart pounding. She had done it. They had done it. CodeKindle was no longer just a platform, it had become a movement, one that was gaining the attention of powerful figures and shaping the future of education. But with all the excitement came a new reality. The world was watching, and now it was up to Emily to make sure that the momentum didn't fizzle out. In the wake of the tournament's success, opportunities came flooding in. Partnerships, sponsorships, interviews, media attention. For the first time, CodeKindle was a name that people recognized, and that came with both its advantages and its challenges. One morning, Emily sat in her office, reviewing a lengthy proposal from a prominent tech company that wanted to integrate CodeKindle into their educational outreach program. The deal was tempting: big money, lots of exposure, and the potential for rapid expansion. But there was something about it that didn't sit right with her. The proposal seemed to focus more on the company's brand than the students' education. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that, in exchange for this corporate partnership, CodeKindle would be asked to tone down its revolutionary approach, to be more marketable and less disruptive. She picked up her phone and called Nia. "Nia, I've been looking over the proposal from Global Tech, and I'm not sure about this one." Nia's voice was sharp with concern. "Why?" "It's everything we've been working toward: big funding, huge exposure. It could take CodeKindle to the next level." "That's just it," Emily replied. "It feels like they want to water us down. We're not in this just to make money, we're in this to change the way kids learn. I don't want to lose that essence." There was a pause on the line before Nia spoke again. "You're right. We can't lose the core of what we do. But what if we negotiated the terms? Could we find a way to make this work without compromising the mission?" Emily had spent the past few days trying to figure out a way to balance growth and integrity. The temptation to take the offer was real, but she couldn't afford to lose what CodeKindle stood for. She thought back to everything that had gotten her to this point: the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the setbacks, and the small victories. This wasn't just about scaling up. It was about staying true to the vision. And that vision was bigger than just CodeKindle. It was about revolutionizing how education worked, about creating a new framework where creativity, critical thinking, and real-world problem-solving weren't just optional, but integral to learning. That night, Emily found herself sitting at her desk, scribbling notes and brainstorming ways to maintain CodeKindle's integrity while securing the funding and support it needed to grow. She wasn't going to let the corporate world swallow them whole. There had to be a way to maintain their authenticity without sacrificing progress. Her phone buzzed, and it was a message from Elon Musk. "Emily, keep doing what you're doing. The future of education needs people like you. Don't compromise. If anything, it's the challenge that will define your success. I'll be watching." A rush of adrenaline surged through her. The man who had inspired her to take this leap in the first place was still supporting her. She wasn't alone in this. The next morning, Emily made a decision. She would counter the proposal with a set of demands. CodeKindle would partner with global tech, but only if they could ensure that the platform remained true to its mission. No compromises on the vision. More funding, yes, but with clear safeguards in place to protect the integrity of their educational philosophy. The meeting with global tech went better than expected. After a long discussion, Emily presented her terms. She didn't back down, and she didn't settle for anything less than what she believed was right. At the end of the meeting, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't just the agreement, it was the confidence she had gained in herself and her ability to stand firm on her values. By the end of the week, the deal with global tech was finalized, and Emily had managed to secure the support CodeKindle needed, without compromising its mission. It was a huge win, but Emily knew that this was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, taking CodeKindle to the next level, making sure it reached as many students as possible, and ensuring that it remained an innovative force for change in the world of education. But she had a plan now. And for the first time in months, she felt like she was ready for whatever came next. That evening, Emily sat down with Nia to discuss their next steps. The tournament had proven that CodeKindle could create real-world solutions, but now they needed to focus on scaling. They needed to push the platform into more schools, into more classrooms. They needed to grow while maintaining the integrity of the original vision. "We're on the right track," Nia said, her voice filled with conviction. "The world is watching, and now it's our job to lead." For the first time in a long time, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. The future was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure: CodeKindle was going to change the world. And she would be at the heart of that change, steering it through the challenges ahead. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Emily stood at the front of a packed auditorium, her heart racing as she looked out at the sea of educators, investors, and tech enthusiasts in front of her. She had been asked to give a keynote speech at the Global Education Summit, the largest event in the education tech space. It was a huge opportunity to showcase CodeKindle's potential to the world. But standing in front of the crowd, Emily felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. The last few months had been a whirlwind, securing the partnership with global tech, hosting the tournament, and managing the growing interest in CodeKindle. It had all been a dream come true. But now, with the world watching, there was no turning back. The world is changing. And education needs to change with it, Emily began, her voice steady as she looked out at the crowd. At CodeKindle, we don't just teach kids to code, we teach them to think critically, to solve real-world problems, to innovate. We're not just preparing students for jobs, we're preparing them to change the world. The crowd was silent as they listened, and Emily's nerves slowly melted away. This was why she had started this journey in the first place. To make a difference. To disrupt the broken education system. As the speech came to an end, the room erupted in applause. Emily could feel the energy in the room shift, and for the first time, she realized how far she had come. CodeKindle wasn't just a tool, it was a movement, one that was gaining momentum and attracting more supporters every day. But with that momentum came more challenges. The deal with global tech had brought much-needed funding, but it had also led to a wave of scrutiny. Investors, educators, and critics alike were all watching, waiting for CodeKindle to either succeed or fail. The pressure was immense, and Emily knew that if they didn't keep delivering, it could all come crashing down. Back in the office, things were moving fast. The team was growing, and the platform was being refined to meet the needs of the increasing number of schools that were signing on. CodeKindle was expanding, but Emily had never felt more stretched thin. She was constantly juggling meetings, presentations, and decisions, and there was never enough time to just be. "Emily, I need to talk to you about something," Nia said one afternoon, her face serious as she walked into Emily's office. Emily looked up from her laptop, feeling a surge of anxiety. "What's going on?" Nia hesitated for a moment before speaking. "We've got some concerns. A few of the schools we're working with, particularly the ones in lower income areas, are starting to pull back." Emily's heart sank. This was the last thing they needed. "Why?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Nia took a deep breath. "The costs are too high for some of them, Emily. They can't afford to adopt CodeKindle at the rate we're pushing. And now that global tech is involved, there's this feeling that we've become a little corporate. Some educators are worried that we're losing sight of what really matters." Emily felt a pang of guilt. She had always promised herself that CodeKindle would be different, that it wouldn't just be another corporate tech company looking to make a quick buck. But now, with the rapid growth and the pressure from investors, she wasn't sure if they could keep their original mission intact. She sat back in her chair, thinking about the students who had first inspired her. The ones who had come from small, underserved schools and had used CodeKindle to change their lives. The students who had been given the chance to dream bigger. They couldn't be left behind. "We have to fix this," Emily said firmly, standing up. "We're not just here to make money, we're here to make a difference. I'm not going to let a few obstacles derail everything we've built." The next few days were a blur of phone calls, strategy sessions, and tough decisions. Emily reached out to several of the schools that had expressed concern and set up meetings to understand their needs. She listened to their struggles and frustrations, and she realized that the cost was a much bigger barrier than she had initially thought. CodeKindle was powerful, but it was also expensive to implement. And as much as Emily wanted to make it available to everyone, she couldn't ignore the reality of the financial challenges some schools were facing. "We need a solution," Emily said to Nia one evening, after a long meeting with a group of school administrators. "We need to find a way to make CodeKindle affordable without compromising the quality of the platform." Nia nodded thoughtfully. "What if we offered a tiered pricing model? A way to give schools in lower income areas access to the platform at a reduced rate?" Emily's eyes lit up. "That's it," she said. "We can offer a scaled-down version for schools that can't afford the full platform. We'll keep the core features, but we'll eliminate some of the advanced options and add-ons. That way, they can still use CodeKindle without breaking their budget." The decision wasn't easy, but it was the right one. They implemented the new pricing structure, and within a few weeks, the number of schools signing up started to grow again. Emily felt a sense of relief, knowing they were doing everything they could to keep CodeKindle accessible to students from all backgrounds. As CodeKindle began to expand, so did Emily's responsibilities. The pressure to perform was higher than ever, and every decision seemed to carry immense weight. She spent long hours in meetings with investors, working on new partnerships, and fine-tuning the platform. There was little time for anything else. But even as Emily navigated the challenges of scaling CodeKindle, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had built this platform to empower students, but in the process, she had lost sight of her own sense of purpose. She had become so focused on growing the company that she had forgotten why she started in the first place. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Emily sat alone in her office. She stared at the screen, feeling a deep sense of exhaustion. Then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Elon Musk. "I've been following your progress. You're doing great things, Emily. But remember, sometimes you have to slow down to see the bigger picture. Keep pushing forward, but don't forget to take care of yourself. The world needs you to be at your best. Those words hit her like a wave. Emily knew that she couldn't keep going at this pace without burning out. She had to find a way to balance her vision for Code Kindle with her own well-being. It wasn't just about growing the company. It was about staying true to the mission, and making sure she was still the person who could lead it forward. Sometimes you have to step outside, get some air, and remind yourself of who you are and who you want to be. The demands of running Code Kindle were beginning to take a toll on Emily. It wasn't just the endless meetings and negotiations, it was the constant pressure to perform, to scale, to keep delivering. It seemed as though the moment one challenge was overcome, another emerged, more daunting than the last. And now, with Code Kindle expanding into more regions and reaching more students than ever before, the weight on Emily's shoulders had never been heavier. She was standing at a crossroads. The company had grown exponentially, and the success of Code Kindle was undeniable. Yet, despite the accolades and the media coverage, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being distant from her own dream. The person she had been when she first founded the company, the passionate innovator, the dreamer, the one who wanted to make education accessible for everyone, seemed to be slipping away, replaced by a version of herself that was constantly worried about survival. Her phone rang, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Nia. "Emily, I think we need to talk." Emily had always relied on Nia for support. Nia had been her rock from the very beginning, the person who understood the vision and the mission behind Code Kindle better than anyone. But lately, even Nia seemed to be struggling under the weight of their shared responsibilities. They met in the conference room, a space that had seen its fair share of heated debates and decision-making over the past few months. Nia's face was serious as she sat down across from Emily. "What's going on, Emily? You've been distant lately. You're pushing yourself too hard, and I can see it's affecting you." Emily hesitated, feeling the weight of exhaustion in her bones. "I don't know anymore, Nia. I thought this was going to be the change we needed, but I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels. Every time I take a step forward, it feels like 2 steps backward." The vision was always to make education better for students, but now I'm not even sure who we're helping anymore. Nia reached across the table, her hand resting gently on Emily's. "I know how hard you're working. But you've changed. We've changed. And that's not a bad thing. The world is shifting, and sometimes we have to shift with it. But you have to remember why we started this. You've already made a difference in so many lives. Don't lose sight of that." The conversation lingered with Emily for days. Nia was right. She had been so focused on growth and expansion that she had lost sight of the purpose behind it all. She had built something that was changing the way students learned, something that was impacting real lives, and yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had sacrificed a piece of herself in the process. Emily knew that she needed to step back and reassess. But how could she? Code Kindle had become a juggernaut, and the expectations on her were only getting higher. One evening, after a particularly draining day of meetings, Emily found herself sitting in the small park behind the office. It had become one of the few places where she could clear her mind, even if just for a moment. She stared at the sky, watching the last rays of sunlight fade into dusk. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a message from Elon Musk. "You're doing something great, Emily. But don't forget that you have to take care of yourself to make the most impact. Take a step back. Reflect. Recharge. When you're at your best, the work will follow." A deep sense of relief washed over her as she read his words. She had been so consumed by the day-to-day operations of the company that she hadn't allowed herself any space to breathe, to reflect. Elon's advice was simple, but it cut through the noise of her thoughts like a lifeline. The next day, Emily made a decision. She would take a break. Not a long one, but a break nonetheless. She needed time to reconnect with her vision, to remind herself of why she started this journey in the first place. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, stepping away for even a short while. But deep down, she knew it was necessary. Emily spent the next few days in relative solitude. She revisited old notes, watched videos of students who had benefited from Code Kindle, and reread the messages of encouragement she had received from teachers and students alike. It was in these quiet moments that Emily found clarity. This was bigger than her. The students, the teachers, the communities they were reaching, they were all relying on Code Kindle to change the educational landscape. And that was worth fighting for. She reflected on the early days, the late nights spent coding in her apartment, the excitement of getting the first version of Code Kindle online, and the joy of seeing the first group of students log in. The mission hadn't changed. The only thing that had changed was the scale. By the time Emily returned to the office, she felt different. She was no longer driven by the need to keep pushing forward at all costs. Instead, she was ready to lead, to guide Code Kindle through this next phase with purpose and intention. When she walked into her office, Nia was there, waiting. "How are you feeling?" Nia asked, her voice warm with concern. Emily smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. "Better. I needed the break, Nia. I needed to remember why we're doing this. We're here to make education better for students. Not just for the sake of growth, but because it's what the world needs." Nia nodded, clearly relieved. "I knew you'd figure it out. But we need you at your best, Emily. We can't do this without you." Emily knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Code Kindle was at a crossroads, and there were still so many challenges to overcome. But with a renewed sense of clarity, Emily felt more prepared than ever to face them. She wasn't just building a company anymore. She was leading a movement, and this movement was about much more than just tech. It was about changing lives. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. The decision Emily had made to step back from the whirlwind of Code Kindle's daily operations had given her clarity. But the next phase of her journey was not going to be as simple as just refocusing on the company's mission. Code Kindle was no longer the small startup she had founded, it had become a force of its own, with a massive footprint in the education tech world. The stakes had never been higher, and Emily was standing at a crossroads. Would she continue to lead the company in a direction that stayed true to its roots, or would the pressures of the market, the investors, and the rapid pace of growth force her to change the very core of what Code Kindle was meant to be? It had been a week since Emily's decision to take a break, and she was back at the office, ready to dive in. The team was buzzing with energy as they prepared for the next major milestone. A global partnership with one of the largest educational systems in the world. But even as she reviewed the pitch deck for the upcoming partnership, Emily couldn't ignore the sense of unease that lingered in the back of her mind. "You okay, Em?" Nia asked as she sat down across from Emily's desk. "You've been quiet this morning." Emily looked up from the documents in front of her, taking a moment to gather her thoughts. "I don't know, Nia. It's just, this partnership with Global Ed could change everything for us. It could push Code Kindle to a whole new level. But I can't shake the feeling that we might be losing our way. It's like we're moving so fast that I'm not sure what we're trying to build anymore." Nia sat back, folding her arms across her chest, her expression thoughtful. "I get it. I've been feeling the same way, honestly. We've come so far, but the direction seems a little too corporate now. And if we go through with this deal, we're going to be tied to their brand, their vision. It's not just about education anymore, it's about scale and numbers and projections." Emily nodded. The words scale and numbers had become synonymous with growth. And growth was important, essential, even. But it seemed to have overshadowed the mission, the reason Code Kindle existed in the first place, to provide equitable, accessible education to all students, regardless of their background. The next day, Emily flew out to San Francisco to meet with the executives of Global Ed in person. She couldn't shake the feeling that the meeting would be pivotal for CodeKindle's future. Would it be the deal that elevated the company, or would it be the moment that caused her to lose sight of her original dream? The Global Ed headquarters was an imposing building, modern and sleek, a symbol of the corporate giant they had become. Emily was greeted by the head of partnerships, Roger Hayes, a polished, suit-wearing man with an easy smile. "Emily, it's a pleasure to meet you in person," he said, extending his hand. "We're incredibly excited about the potential of working together." As they walked into the conference room, Emily couldn't help but notice the contrast between the sleek, cutting-edge technology of the office and the humanity she had fought so hard to preserve in CodeKindle. She was here to close the deal, but a part of her wondered whether it was the right thing to do. Roger's team outlined the details of the partnership, how it would help CodeKindle expand into over 200,000 schools worldwide, the significant financial backing, and the brand exposure that came with partnering with a recognized name in education. It was everything they'd ever wanted, too good to refuse. But as the meeting went on, Emily felt a growing sense of discomfort. There were discussions about targets, milestones, and quarterly revenue growth. The focus was on numbers, not the students. The kind of students who needed CodeKindle the most, the ones in low-income schools, the ones in rural areas, the ones without access to the resources that more affluent districts took for granted. "So, Emily, tell me," Roger said, pulling her out of her thoughts, "how do you envision this partnership benefiting CodeKindle in the long run?" Emily paused, considering her response carefully. She had worked so hard to get to this point, to make CodeKindle a success. But she couldn't ignore the feeling that she was about to make a deal that might not align with everything she believed in. "I see this as an opportunity to make education accessible to more students than ever before," she said slowly, choosing her words with care. "But I also see the potential for this to change who we are. I want to make sure that no matter how big we get, we never lose sight of our mission, to empower students from all backgrounds to be creators, innovators, and problem solvers." Roger gave a quick nod, clearly not fully understanding the weight of Emily's words. His focus was on the growth metrics, not the impact on the students. And in that moment, Emily realized that she was facing a choice, a big decision that would determine the future of CodeKindle. Would she compromise, or would she hold on to the principles that had led her to start this company in the first place? Back in the hotel room that evening, Emily stared out at the city skyline, trying to make sense of it all. She had always admired Elon Musk for his ability to see beyond the present and take bold risks for the sake of something bigger. But had she misunderstood the true cost of growth? Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Nia. "Just checking in. How's it going with Global Ed? You okay?" Emily took a deep breath, typing out a response. "It's complicated. I'm realizing that we've reached a crossroads, Nia. The partnership is incredible in terms of growth, but I don't know if it aligns with what we set out to do. I'm torn." Nia's reply came almost instantly. "You know what's right, Emily. Follow your gut. You don't have to make this decision alone. We're a team, and we'll figure it out together." The words gave Emily the clarity she needed. She had started this journey to make a difference in the lives of students, not to chase growth at any cost. As much as she knew this deal would propel CodeKindle forward, she wasn't willing to sacrifice the integrity of the mission. That night, Emily made a decision that would change the course of the company. She called Roger and told him that while they appreciated the offer, CodeKindle couldn't move forward with the partnership, not in the way Global Ed envisioned. It was a gamble, a huge risk. But for the first time in a long while, Emily felt like she was making the right choice for the future. Not just the companies, but for all the students who still needed CodeKindle's vision. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?